naked eye, but it's brought to life by the Nikon D5's unique ability to capture detail images in extremely low light situations. As the Earth grew smaller in their windows, the crew of Integrity would spend Saturday and Sunday running tests and experiments on board the ship as they prepared for the main event, the lunar flyby. What separates Artemis II from every Apollo moon mission is the distance they will cover. At their furthest point from Earth, the crew reached a distance of over 252,000 miles, further than any person has ever traveled from home. This gives them a very unique perspective on the moon itself because at an altitude of about 4,000 miles, they get to see the entire thing fill their spacecraft windows. It's kind of like if you held a basketball out at the end of your arm. That's how big the moon would appear to the eyes of the crew. The guys on Apollo orbited the moon at a much lower altitude, just a few hundred miles, so they could only ever see one small area at a time, and they were always circling around the equator of the moon, so they never had a clear view of the polar regions. Now, during their approach to the moon, the crew was able to spot two previously unidentified craters on the surface, and this is kind of the emotional heart of the entire mission. One of those new craters was proposed to be named Integrity to commemorate this mission and the vehicle that carried them there. The second is a bright spot crater that lies right on the boundary between the near and far side. This one was proposed to be named Carol, after Reed Wiseman's late wife who passed away in 2020. Those bright spots were one of the first really interesting observations made by the crew. These fresh impacts kick up light-colored dust from just below the surface and stand out against the dull gray of the moon. Christina Cook noted that these are so bright they kind of look like holes poked in a map shade. And this is the kind of observation that is so important from Artemis II. Even with a really great digital camera, there is still a lot of nuance that only the human eye can see. Our eyes perceive a much greater dynamic range between dark and bright than any camera sensor, and we also see a lot more color. Here's an illustration of that. The big curving shape is the entire visible color spectrum, and that triangle inside is the small fraction that can fit into a digital image. So while the photographs still have incredible value, the most unique data from Artemis II is the first-person accounts of the astronauts as they describe what they see on the moon with their own eyes. For example, the crew noted that the moon is not actually as gray as it appears from Earth. They saw distinct hues of brown and even a faint green in some of the impact crater regions. As Integrity drew closer to the moon, they started crossing the boundary that separates the near side from the far side. That transition is marked by a large impact crater known as the Orientale Basin. It's 600 miles wide and 3.8 billion years old, and Artemis II was the first time people have ever seen the entire thing. As the spacecraft rounds over Orientale, the far side of the moon begins to reveal itself. This is our moon like you have never seen it before. People often refer to this as the dark side, but it gets just as much sun as any other place on the moon. The weird part about it is that this side always faces away from us on Earth, so we've only ever seen the whole thing through satellite images. The first thing that you'll notice is it's a much lighter region. There are none of those big dark spots that we associate with the face of the moon. Those are ancient volcanic lakes that filled up with lava rock billions of years ago when the moon was forming. So we know that for some reason the volcanoes were concentrated on the Earth-facing side, but we don't know why that is. This is one of the mysteries that the Artemis program is hoping to solve. So with the absence of any volcanic activity to smooth it out, the far side of the moon is marked by heavy cratering. You can see that most clearly in images that the crew photographed along the terminator line. That's the transition from night to day. And through here, the low angle of the sunlight creates a super high contrast between dark shadowed lowlands and brightly lit highlands. The crew noted in their remarks during this time that the surface of the moon is nowhere near as flat as it appeared from a distance. There are actually tall peaks and steep cliffs around these impact craters, making for a rough and complex geography. One of the areas that they were able to see as the spacecraft circled around the far side was the South Bull Aitken Basin. This is where NASA wants to land future Artemis missions with crew on board and eventually build a permanent outpost on the moon. We can see pretty clearly from these observations that the Artemis landings will be nothing like the old Apollo missions. Those touched down on the flat volcanic plains of the equator region on the near side, while the terrain for Artemis will be so much more rugged and challenging to navigate. Turning their attention back toward home, the crew is able to witness another unique phenomenon. Not a sunset, but an Earthset, as our planet begins to dip down below the horizon of the moon. It's around this point that Integrity loses contact with the Earth. That's not a problem, it's just an unfortunate effect of using laser-based communications. Once the moon passes in between the ship and the Earth, the line of communication is broken, so for a period of about 40 minutes, these 4 people were totally unreachable. Must be nice. As they came back into communication range, they witnessed an Earthrise, an image that was made famous by the crew of Apollo 8 when they captured this photograph on Christmas Eve in 1968. And now